Mainstream media clearly has a bee in its bonnet regarding electric cars. Whether that bee was put there deliberately by oil companies, legacy automakers, politicians even. There's just no denying it at this point. Someone's up to some mischief. The daily barrage of misinformation and lies is relentless, despite of course the many millions of happy EV owners gliding around our streets, most of which will be saving a ton of money thanks to charging at home on a cheap overnight tariff, saving money from far less service and maintenance and zero road tax, let alone all the other benefits. So why is it that the average Joe, or Jolene, or non-gender Joe, seems to understand so little about the positive reality of electric car ownership? Not only that, but many folks have been successfully brainwashed into thinking EVs are bad. The charging, the Cobalt, the tyre wear, the puddles! It's all a bit much for any thinking person, let alone for someone who's actually owned an EV for years and saved £12,000 for the pleasure. The reality is, owning and running an EV can be ludicrously cheaper than owning and running an ICE car. It's also true that the vast amount of the general public have been spectacularly misinformed and lied to. But perhaps the best way of explaining what's going on in the minds of many is by imagining two different types of people. At one end of the spectrum there's, let's call him Max Frugal. He's careful with money, some might say a bit tight, but he appreciates the true value something gives rather than the cost of it, and he most certainly likes to save money rather than wasting it. Instead of soaking up the ridiculous, lying, fear-mongering, disgraceful headlines of the mainstream media about electric cars, Max Frugal looked at some facts and evidence instead. He takes an EV for a test drive, forms his own opinions. Perhaps he goes home and geekishly researches the life cycle carbon emissions of ICE versus EVs and discovers the obvious winner. Who does that? He delves even deeper by looking into which cars use their energy more efficiently and is shocked to find out that 80% of energy used within an ICE car is mechanical and heat waste. So just 20% of all that energy created from burning it in an engine propels the car. Contrast that to the efficiency of an EV, where 95% of its energy gets delivered to the wheels. That's simply better, more efficient technology. Max Frugal also discovers that the average lifetime mileage of an ICE vehicle is about 133,000 miles, while the average EV battery will last around 200,000 miles. Some manufacturers already promise more than that. Not only will an electric car last longer than a combustion engine one, it is incredibly unlikely that you or anyone else will need to pay to replace the battery in your EV. This is a well-debunked myth. And unlike an engine, electric car batteries are recyclable, with techniques allowing up to 95% of the raw materials to be recovered and reused indefinitely. It will become cheaper to recycle batteries than mine for new materials. Governments globally are also mandating EV batteries to be designed and manufactured in an easily recyclable way. Marvellous! Max Frugal discovers that Cobalt is indeed present in some EV batteries, although the vast majority of newly sold Teslas around the world this year contain zero Cobalt, by the way. Max also understands that Cobalt has been used for decades in laptops, mobile phones, computer circuit boards, rechargeable toothbrushes, sex toys. It's used as a dyeing agent for paints, stains and varnishes. It's used in the manufacturing of magnetic, wear-resistant and high-strength alloys, cosmetics, makeup, hair dye, tattoos. Cobalt gives that nice distinctive deep blue colour to glass, ceramics, inks and paints. Cobalt is also used in the petroleum industry as a catalyst when refining crude oil. This is to purge it of sulphur, which would be very polluting if burned, as it causes acid rain. Cobalt is even a major part of the structure of vitamin B12. We're literally eating cobalt, wearing it, carrying it around in our pockets, painting pretty pictures on our skin with it, sometimes. It is very useful indeed. So despite the EV industry now moving away from Cobalt, my question is this: where was everyone's phony outrage against Cobalt before EVs came along? Like the vast majority of people, Max has a driveway where he knows he can charge his new electric car overnight on a cheap tariff, which in the UK at least is around a quarter of the cost of average daytime electricity. After saving his pennies over the years, he decides to do the Tesla stretch as it's known and pay just that bit more than he usually would for a new car, as he can see the true value it brings. But you know what, forget that. Max Frugal is so frugal, he decides to buy a low mileage, used Tesla instead, which will still have a drive unit and battery warranty for the remainder of either 8 years or 100,000 miles for that nice extra peace of mind. He finds one for £18,000. 200 plus miles range, bonkers performance, all the space it needs, one of the safest cars ever tested, loads of fun, happy days. Max Frugal put 60,000 miles on the clock over the next 3 years, having predominantly charged in his driveway on a cheap overnight tariff at today's going rate of 7p per kilowatt hour, and with the Model 3's exceptionally good 4.5 miles per kilowatt hour used, that's a total electricity cost of £1,200 over the full 3 years. However, 60,000 miles at today's petrol prices for the average car would be £10,400. That's a savings difference of £9,200 in fuel costs alone. Add to that way lower service and maintenance cost, as there's just fewer parts to go wrong with EVs, plus zero road tax, and hey presto, half of the car has just paid for itself in savings, and it'll still be worth something even with 100,000 miles on the clock. And like many Teslas, it might well surpass 200,000 miles with ease. Mr. Money Moustache himself would be proud, although even he relented recently and brought a new Tesla. The temptation was just too strong, it seems. EVs are catching on. We'll see more people waking up to the idea of becoming energy independent at home, with solar panels and battery storage, heat pumps. The ability to stop burning fossil fuels at home and in cars is a reality for the folks that can afford to do so, and is most certainly a future goal of mine. But that's not all. As our energy grid continues to become cleaner each year thanks to wind, solar, battery storage projects, the very electricity powering electric cars becomes cleaner too. Over the past week, for example, over half of the electricity needs in the UK has come from wind alone, and just a piddly 1.3% from coal. So for all those EVs that have been charging over the past week, half of that energy has come from wind. That's good news, and as more people continue to discover the benefits of an electric car, the very air that we breathe in our towns and cities improves as well. It really is a win-win for everyone. Consumers can save a lot of money, especially if charging from home. The grid is becoming cleaner each year thanks to growing renewable energy, which is powering everyone's EVs. The air becomes cleaner thanks to no exhaust emissions, and battery recycling will grow to be an enormous closed-loop system of reusing the materials rather than mining for new ones. A nice example of this is by 2025, all Apple-designed batteries will be made with 100% certified recycled Cobalt. Progress, and that'll happen to EV batteries too. It's worth knowing that transport accounts for around 1/5 of global carbon dioxide, and although there are a lot of other issues to be resolved here, we have to understand that we are taking part in a crazy experiment of filling up our atmosphere with more and more carbon dioxide, which we know is having an effect on the overall global temperature. And we also know that we will run out of fossil fuels at some point in the future anyway. We might as well and really must shift from burning stuff to clean renewable energy and transportation as soon as humanly possible. Future life on Earth might well depend on it. But that brings me nicely onto our second character. I'm sure you've met him somewhere already. It's Grumpy Ken. Ken's mind is like a fortress. No new ideas can penetrate these walls. He's never changed his mind in his life because he knows he's always right. Engines will never be replaced, so too those gloriously dirty, stinky, polluting fossil fuels. Everything needs to stay the same forever, just like when everyone travelled by horse. Those were the days. Ken loves his diesel trucks and his enormous exhaust compensating for his tiny, tiny, tiny brain. Any attack on an internal combustion engine is a direct attack on Ken's ego, and Ken's ego doesn't like that at all. Grumpy Ken likes to remind everyone he meets that EVs will spontaneously combust at some point, that you can't drive through puddles, that car parks and bridges will indeed collapse with the sheer weight of too many EVs. He'll tell you how expensive, how much more polluting they really are with tyre wear alone, how they're responsible for all of the potholes, and how you'll have to change the battery every few years. Oh Ken, if only you would embrace the future, you might have a less miserable life. However, people are waking up to where these grumpy Kens are getting their misinformation from. The news media does a great job of convincing the general public that EVs are bad. Whether this is deliberate misinformation pushed from who knows, oil companies who want to keep people sucking on the teat of fossil fuels, politicians that are lobbied and controlled from above, legacy car companies who pay mainstream media vast sums of money to advertise on their platforms. Can't really speak badly of them, can they? Or perhaps it's just the last dying breaths of legacy media as they realise they cannot compete with digital media, podcasts, independent free-thinking voices that explore things in depth and look into the facts and truth of any subject. Legacy media headlines have to stoop so low into the chasm of poop to pull out their next ridiculous EV-bashing headline, which will be read by the hordes of NPCs who just soak it up and can't wait to spread the latest idiotic fake news stories about electric cars. I've always loved cars, but the fact remains that ICE cars are simply dumb compared to EVs when you really understand and experience them both. 20 moving parts in an electric drive unit versus 2,000 found in an engine. There's an obvious, superior, efficient winner here. The cost to build electric cars will continue to fall as manufacturing cost efficiencies are made. Engines have reached their peak financial savings. EVs and batteries are just getting started on the road to lowering costs. And of course, one of these propulsion systems can be powered on clean renewable energy. The other cannot. We could embrace an electric economy and move towards a sustainable, energy-abundant future, while saving CO2 emissions, drastically lowering local air pollution, save a ton of money if indeed you want to become more of a max frugal type, and just wake up to the BS we are being fed on a daily basis from our trusted news networks, and from the grumpy Kens of the world. I urge anyone who's watching this, the next time you hear a regurgitated, nonsensical argument against electric cars, arm yourself, challenge them with facts, evidence and data against their position, because the future depends on unreasonable people who are not willing to accept the stagnancy of the way things are. Reasonable people will do what they are told, accept the normality of life, and never push for change. Change needs challenge. Progress needs protest. And the disruptive change that's coming about from electric cars and sustainable energy, and quite frankly, everything from Elon Musk's companies, is the catalyst we need to move into an energy-abundant, futuristic future. Who's with me? Still on my own, just ranting to myself. It's a bit weird when you think about it. Max Frugal and Grumpy Ken simply represent the spectrum of where everybody is today. You might be somewhere in the middle or utterly baffled at my ramblings. Don't worry, I am too sometimes. If so, well done for sticking with me. But from one end of the money-saving, tech-loving progressives to the stubborn technophobes and Luddites who would rather die than get an EV and embrace change, all I can do is share my experience after being balls deep into Tesla for years, and share things like my last video which breaks down my true cost of ownership and the £12,000 I've saved so far from owning and running a Tesla Model 3 for 4.5 years. It's amazing, hence I just want to share the good news with anyone who might enjoy saving money too, rather than burning it. Have a watch. A massive thanks to my wonderful Patreon supporters. I'm Will, this is the Tesla Jigsaw, thanks so much for watching, bye for now.